Hello and welcome. My name is Clay. Thank you for tuning in. 2020 is almost here, which means that best of decade lists and rankings are all the rage right now, and here I am to join in on that fun. Today in this episode, we are going to be counting down the 5 worst Chicago Blackhawks trades of the decade. Let's go. Now, before we begin, I need to give you a little fine print here. This list is based on my opinion and my opinion alone, which means it is not the end-all be-all. If you agree with me or disagree with me or think I missed something, whatever it may be, I encourage you to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And with that said, let's begin. The 5th worst trade for the Chicago Blackhawks of this past decade happened on February 26th, 2016. Blackhawks trying to make another deadline deal to push themselves over the top and make another cup run. Now, if you remember, Blackhawks just came off their 3rd cup in 6 years, so they are no strangers to making these deadline deals to make the cup runs. But this one backfired on them quite spectacularly. Blackhawks sending center prospect Phillip Danault and the 2018 second-round draft pick to the Montreal Canadiens in exchange for Thomas Fleischmann and Dale Weise. Unfortunately for the Hawks, Weise and Fleischmann really didn't do a whole lot of anything for them, and the Hawks would end up getting bounced in the first round of the playoffs. Meanwhile, Phillip Danault would turn out to be a quality centerman for the Montreal Canadiens during the next couple of years in which the Blackhawks really struggled to find center depth behind Jonathan Toews and Artem Anisimov. Number 4, the 4th worst trade of the decade for the Chicago Blackhawks happened on October 4th, 2014. Blackhawks trading defenseman Nick Leddy to the New York Islanders in exchange for 4 prospects. Now, on the surface, that looks great. Give up 1 player, get 4 in return. The problem is, none of those 4 players really turned out to be anything for the Hawks. None of them really cracked the NHL roster. All AHL are traded away. So basically, the Hawks got nothing for Nick Leddy, who was and still is a pretty darn good defenseman. Now, this trade happened basically right at the beginning of the season. It was the last year of Nick Leddy's contract, which was around $2.5-ish million, so nothing really breaking the bank at all. Hawks could have easily waited until the trade deadline to get more for him if they really wanted to. Now, it's tough to really question this because the Hawks did end up winning the Stanley Cup that year, so it all worked out. But at what cost? The Blackhawks basically went with 4 defensemen during those playoffs, which put a lot of extra mileage on guys like Duncan Keith and Brent Seabrook, and the Hawks are pretty much paying for that right now. Now, the Hawks did end up getting a defenseman during the trade deadline that year. They gave up 2 picks to get Kimmo Timonen, so they also kind of wasted 2 picks when they could have maybe just stuck with Nick Leddy. But once again, they did win the Stanley Cup, so who am I to question it? But still, it's the 4th worst trade of the decade for the Hawks. Number 3, the 3rd worst trade of the decade for the Chicago Blackhawks happened on December 14, 2015, when the Blackhawks traded away recently acquired defenseman Trevor Daley to the Pittsburgh Penguins in exchange for defenseman Rob Scuderi. And I really shouldn't have to expand on that. The Blackhawks traded away Trevor Daley for Rob Scuderi. The Blackhawks got Trevor Daley in the trade that sent Patrick Sharp to Dallas, and he looked good as a Blackhawk. He had decent stats, he looked good on the ice, but something was just not a fit, apparently. So the Blackhawks went to trade him away, and all they could get in return was Rob Scuderi, who was at that time 36-ish years old. Yeah. The Blackhawks would end up just wiping their hands clean of it and trading Rob Scuderi away to the Kings at the trade deadline. Meanwhile, Trevor Daley would go on to help the Pittsburgh Penguins win 2 straight Stanley Cups. Hawks would end up getting bounced in the first round of both those years. Number 2, oh boy, here we go. The 2nd worst trade of the decade for the Chicago Blackhawks happened on June 23rd, 2017. That's a date a lot of Blackhawks fans remember for all the wrong reasons, this trade being one of those reasons. Blackhawks trading away Artemi Panarin, Tyler Mott, and a 2018 6th round pick to the Columbus Blue Jackets in exchange for Brandon Saad, Anton Forsberg, and a 2018 5th round pick. Basically, it was Artemi Panarin for Brandon Saad. Now, there are valid reasons for why this trade was made, salary cap control being the biggest reason. Blackhawks right up against the salary cap, had to be mindful of it. Panarin, 2 years left on a $6 million deal. Blackhawks had 2 years to get something for him because they were not going to be able to afford his next contract. So they go out and bring back Brandon Saad, who was a big part of 2 Stanley Cup runs for the Blackhawks, but most importantly, Brandon Saad, 4 years left on a $6 million deal. So the Hawks gained 2 extra years of knowledge of what they would be spending, and when you're up against the salary cap, that is very important knowledge to have. However, after the magical season that Panarin had with Patrick Kane on his other wing, the Blackhawks made this trade way too soon. Blackhawks overreacting from getting swept in the playoffs, which we've come to find out is really not that rare of a thing and really is no reason to blow up a team. This was not a good trade. Although Brandon Saad is definitely not the reason the Hawks have missed the playoffs ever since this trade happened. But the Blackhawks got rid of a very, very, very good, basically irreplaceable player in Artemi Panarin, a guy that could have helped the Hawks make another run the following year. And finally, number 1, the worst trade of the decade for the Blackhawks happened on June 15th, 2016, when the Blackhawks traded Brian Bickle and Teuvo Teravainen to the Carolina Hurricanes in exchange for a 2016 second round pick and a 2017 third round pick. Now, the Blackhawks were in salary cap hell like they were pretty much the entire decade, and they were desperate to get rid of Brian Bickle's contract. And desperate times call for desperate measures. So for any team to take on Bickle's contract, the Hawks knew they needed to throw in some sort of sweetener in that deal. That sweetener ended up being Teuvo Teravainen. Unfortunately, Teuvo Teravainen is just way too much sweetener for that trade pot. I mean, that trade was way too sugary from that. We know how Teuvo Teravainen turned out as a player, a very good player, very, very good player. Hawks got 2 draft picks from that trade, but the chances of either of those prospects turning into somebody that made getting rid of Teuvo Teravainen worth it is pretty slim to none. So there you have it, the 5 worst trades of the decade for the Chicago Blackhawks. As I mentioned earlier, if you agree, disagree, thought I missed something, or whatever, let me know down in the comments section below. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe. As always, I appreciate that, but most importantly, stay safe, make good decisions, and I'll see you next time.